Hi everyone, my name is Janice McGregor and I'm looking at contrasting approaches to translation for my presentation, of which, as we all know, there are quite a few. From the very beginning of translation theory, there have been very many different theories on how text should be translated from the source language to the target language. One of the earliest examples of this goes back to Cicero and St. Jerome, who looked at the distinction between word for word, also known as literal translation, and sense for sense, also known as free translation. As Mundy points out, this forms the basis of key writings on translations and has done for almost 2,000 years. Contrasting by definition shows how two things are different, unlike comparing things, which looks for similarities. By creating contrasting approaches to something like translation, it offers alternative ways of transferring the text from the source language to the target language. Many translation theorists have put forward their approaches on how a text should be translated, and here I've mentioned just a few of them. Each one gives a different opinion on how a translation could be approached, and the reasoning behind it, whether it be Nida's formal or dynamic equivalence, mainly used with Bible texts, or House's view on whether it should be an overt or covert translation. For the benefits of this presentation, I've chosen to look at the theory of foreignization versus domestication, the last one pointed out here, and the theory behind it, how it overlaps with other approaches, and in particular Venuti's theory around visibility. And I'm also looking at a related example as well. So the background to the theory of foreignization versus domestication this theory has been around for hundreds of years. However, it was during the 1990s that Venuti brought it to light in his book, The Translators and Visibility, A History of Translation. In terms of the definition of the two different theories, domestication is a style of translation which is transparent. It's a fluent style to minimise the strangeness of the foreign texts for the target reader, or as Venuti puts it, bringing the author back home. It conforms to the target culture and may involve losing some of the information from the source text in order to do this, and this is one of Venuti's key criticisms around it. Foreignization, on the other hand, means a target text is produced which deliberately breaks target conventions by retaining something of the foreignness of the original. This is done in order to preserve its meaning and not lose anything from the source text, something which Venuti is much more in favour of. In terms of the application of these two contrasting approaches, Eugene Nida is regarded as the representative who favours domesticating translation. He believes in a dynamic or functional equivalence, where the reader has the equivalent effect in reading the translated text as the original reader did in reading the source text. The experience should be the same for both sets of readers. Venuti, on the other hand, who's regarded the spokesperson for those who favour foreignization, he strongly condemns domestication as it reduces the meaning of the source text to the target text cultures and values. It involves minimising the foreignness of the text so the translation is transparent and invisible, something I'm going to go on to talk a little about later on in my presentation. So looking at foreignization and domestication, there are very many links with other contrasting theories of translation. In particular with the word for word versus sense for sense approach, and also Schleiermacher's theory. In terms of word for word versus sense for sense, this approach to translation, this has been compared and contrasted for nearly 2,000 years. And the foreignization versus domestication debate is seen by some as an extension of this. Should readers just get a sense of the original text and it be adapted to the target reader, or should every word be translated and therefore leaning towards foreignization? Schleiermacher's theory also has similarities with foreignization versus domestication, because he believed the feeling of the original shouldn't be lost in translation. Therefore, this can be seen as foreignization. He believed that either the translator leaves the author in peace as much as possible and moves the reader towards him, or he leaves the reader in peace as much as possible and moves the author towards him. So with both of these, you can see that there are links back to foreignization versus domestication, and obviously similarities across different contrasting approaches of translation theory. In taking this contrasting theory a little further, I looked at Venuti's view on visibility, the visibility of the translator, and how he believes that domesticating a translation means the translator and the original text can become invisible, as you can see here in the quote from Jeremy. Venuti believes that with this method, the translator is becoming invisible. In fact, many translated texts don't actually have the translator's name featured, so the reader could well be led to believe that the text was written by the original author, and therefore takes the value away from what the translator is doing. This was taken further by Venuti, as described by Basnet in her book on translation studies here. Venuti argues that in contemporary Anglo-American culture, translated texts are judged acceptable provided traces of their foreign origin are removed, and that ideal translation should read as fluently as possible to create an illusion of transparency. And this was also reiterated by Lefebvre in 1992, where he argues that translators should be credited as creators of new texts for new readers. He points out that most readers don't read literature as written by its writers, but as rewritten by its rewriters. So for Basnet, she says that for Lefebvre and Venuti, the study of translation should be at the core, not the margins of literary cultural studies. Both are very worried about the status of the translator in the cultural field. So to look at this a little bit in practice, I looked at one of my favourite authors, who is the Spanish author Javier Marias. And the translation of his works by Margaret Yo Costa. As some of you may know, Javier Marias was previously a translator himself before he became an author. So he has a great knowledge of the translation industry and theory and everything behind it. And quite a few of his novels actually feature translators. As you can see here by his quote, he says, "What is most important of all, and it has been said many times, is that a translator is a privileged reader, but also a privileged writer. What you do is rewrite in a completely different language something that was written by a great writer. The wording is yours, of course you try to be faithful, but you have to choose, always." And when Margaret Yo Costa was talking in a recent interview about working with Javier Marias, she said that it was great to work with somebody like him because he had an understanding of the industry, had an understanding of translation. So when she had any questions, he was great to help with that. But going back to the kind of theory of the visibility of the translator and also foreignization and domestication, Margaret Yo Costa was asked in a recent interview what she thought about this. As you can see here, she very much believes that there's room to move between the two, both foreignization and domestication. It doesn't have to be one or the other. She believes that a translated text should have its own identity, but also remain true to the original, as you can see here. We won't go reading it all just now, but certainly, you can see that she very much believes that there's some way of working with both theories. So to conclude, I feel the approach of foreignization versus domestication is very clearly linked with other approaches to translation, and will probably continue to be a topic for debate for some time to come. I do feel the points made by Margaret Yo Costa are very valid, however, in the fact that perhaps there is a need for the use of both foreignization and domestication in translation at times, and not necessarily just one or the other. I feel the link from this to the question of visibility of the translator is really interested in terms of how far the translator should be seen. And in doing so, are we taking away some of the credibility of the translator? It's an interesting debate. Thank you for your time.